Welcome everyone to our career panel. My name is Zhuoya Zhang. I'm a first-year MPH in epidemiology student and a member of the school's career advisory board. Today, we are fortunate to hear from a panel of students and alumni with diverse research and internship experiences. Framed by question we received during registration and using the Q&A feature, we'll discuss strategy to search, apply, and interview for dynamic research and internship positions. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our panelists in no particular order. Nidhi Bhaskar is a senior undergraduate at Brown studying health policy and is a member of the 8-year program in liberal medical education. She's passionate about international medicine and public health and has worked on research pertaining to national opioid epidemic, upper medical schools, global emergency medicine literature review, and the minority AIDS prevention initiative at the Brown School of Public Health. Outside of research, he's an opinion columnist for the Brown Daily Herald, a founder of Brown's Effective Altruism chapter, and a member of the Philosophy, Politics, and Economics Society. Our second panelist, Ellie Rogoff, is a senior at Brown, concentrating in public health and enrolled in the undergraduate MPH program at the School of Public Health. Ellie is passionate about the issue of combating food insecurity and how food insecurity relates to people's health and quality of life. Currently, she's an intern at the Rhode Island Public Health Institute, working with the Food on the Move team centered around this issue. During previous summers, Ellie interned for the following organizations: Hospital for Special Surgery in the Administrative Department, Mobile ODT, a biomedical engineer startup in Tel Aviv, Our Rights, and Marcel, a healthcare consulting firm, and the Rhode Island Department of Public Health. This summer, Ellie will be an intern for Putem Associates. And Rachel Yorlets is currently a second-year PhD student in epidemiology at the Brown School of Public Health and a predoctoral fellow at the Population Studies and Training Center. Prior to beginning her PhD program, Rachel worked for several years in global health and clinical research at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. She completed her MPH in epidemiology with a focus on infectious disease epidemiology at the Boston University School of Public Health. Georgiana McTigue is currently a global HIV prevention fellow at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She graduated from Brown last year with an AB in public health and MPH in global health. At Brown, she was a student researcher in the Women's Health Intervention and Transitions Research Group and an advisory board member at the Center for Alcohol and Addiction Studies. Prior to beginning her fellowship at CDC, she worked for several years in clinical research at Miriam Hospital, Rhode Island Free Clinic, Clinton Health Access Initiative, and Harvard Medical School. And last but not least, Ana Lucia. Ana Lucia is currently a master's student in biostatistics at the School of Public Health. She's deeply passionate about quantitative research, learning, and health equity. She's currently a research assistant for the ILARM project, focusing on improving the adherence and access to HIV testing in South Africa. And during previous summer, she has interned at New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene and Partners in Health. Welcome to all. Let's get started with a question for everyone, and then we'll move on to pre-submitted questions, followed by Q&A submissions. So my first question is for all of our panelists. Many students don't know where to start the process or get disappointed when they don't land interviews right away. What advice would you give to students just starting the process?
Is anyone going to jump in? What's the format of today? Do we just kind of talk when we have an answer, or do you want to call out specific names? Is it anyone?
Yeah, just feel free to jump in if you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to speak on that topic. I think I was extremely eager to take part in any sort of research opportunity and get to know the field even before I thought about internships. And I thought the greatest resource was honestly Brown Connect, because I was able to see, you know, what kind of alums are out there and what jobs they're doing to position where I maybe saw myself, to do some informal interviews and calls. And then I also utilize more in the academic sense, researchers at Brown. That's how I initially found my internship or like research presented with Mary Flynn in the food as medicine program at Miriam Hospital. And I kind of segued that into like thesis work for my undergrad. So I really just took my first initial step with browsing both of those platforms and figuring out what I had interest in, and then going with those next steps, which are usually some emails.
Along the lines of what Ellie said, I definitely advocate for reaching out for informational interviews. I found that I got a lot of real interviews based on just reaching out to people that researched things that I was interested in at organizations that I wanted to work at. And before you know it, they would introduce you to a couple of people. Those couple of people would each introduce you to more. So it was a great networking strategy to find out also about what sometimes like referred to as like a hidden job network, where things aren't even posted yet, or they've been starting to think about opening a position, but it's not quite in the pipeline. And the other thing I found after my MPH, I was like heartbroken because there was this job I really wanted, and I interviewed 3 times for it, and I thought, things were going really well. And in the end, they were like, you don't have quite enough like hands-on experience with patients. We would have liked to have seen someone who consented more patients for research studies. And so I found a volunteer opportunity and bolstered that area of my CV. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 that sometimes people want you to have something you need for the job that you can't get without the job. So sometimes if you can find other pockets, even if it means a volunteer thing.
I absolutely agree with that. And also wanted to really emphasize the hidden network of job opportunities. So as far as my internship opportunities, I feel like I'm about 50-50 for positions I've gone through like a traditional application process, and positions that I've gotten through like a network of people that I've met, or even like cold emailed, and they've been kind enough to like take me on and like create a position for me. I think at the end of the day, like what experiences you have will really speak for themselves, and like you should try to play to your strengths, especially with your coursework, with your genuine interests, and that will be what you can write to in your cover letters. So potential employers, or like even the people you cold email, can definitely recognize passion, and if they sense that passion and you reach out to enough places, you will find some leads that will be useful in getting you that position.
I'd echo what Rachel said about, in some ways, taking what you can get. I remember as a freshman undergrad, I, for the summer after, was looking for something public health related. I didn't really have many connections at Brown, or kind of those networking starting points. So I was just cold applying to many, many things, and it took, many, many, many tries. And, for me, it worked out. For some people who just take that cold applying route, it's not going to work out, and that's okay. When you're looking for that first position, like Rachel said, it's challenging. And I remember, in that search, a public health professor basically gave me advice that was saying, you need to realize, like, you go to a great institution, you also are a freshman and you don't have a lot of experience. So you really need to sort of express that you're willing to do any type of work, whether that's the grunt work, whether that's the tedious work, not a dream job, but get started somewhere. And like Rachel said, I think volunteering is a really great place to start. I totally acknowledge that that's not always financially possible. And I think that's another catch-22 in the public health field is, a lot of opportunities don't come with funding, but those are also kind of the only opportunities there when you're starting out, and some of the most important ones. So thinking about alternate ways you might be able to fund something that is otherwise unpaid, thinking about getting funding through the Swearer Center, or, some other type of fellowship, to just think about, what you can make work.
Thank you so much for sharing your advice Our second question is that what technical skills do you find most important in your research, and how can students develop these on their own?
So I just wanted to, number one, I am getting the message that my bandwidth is low. So if I freeze at some point, I can turn off my video, and I think that might help. Anyway, so I would just say in terms of research or in a job, at least in the current position that I'm in, you know, unsurprisingly, the technical skills that I've on the most so far, and I've brought up during interviews, both for internships and for this position, are those, you know, data analysis skills. I had a mentality when I was in the MPH program and before when I was an undergrad, that I wouldn't study anything I didn't want to have to do in a job. Because I thought, oh, okay, if I'm the one person who knows like R on my team, then I'm going to be the person who has to do that. And if I don't want to do that, I mean, some people love data analysis, so don't let me lead you astray. But I think just having a good balance of classes, I'm sure other people can speak to what you can do outside of coursework, but since you are currently students, taking a nice balance of both the technical kind of statistical, or maybe that's quantitative coding, those courses, along with more subject matter ones where you can really immerse yourself in the current research, I think is really important. And kind of going along with the last question, I would just add, if you can, for me, working while I was in school was really important, just as far as financially being able to pay for a degree. So I think another benefit of finding some work or volunteering while you are surrounded by tons of institutions, academic institutions, hospitals, where you can do meaningful work, the Department of Health, you're going to pick up those skills while you are both in and out of the classroom.
I think to second that, I completely agree with what Georgie's saying, and I definitely had experience just in the first year master's taking biostats, like getting comfortable with data and other coding programs, understanding the use of, like, if you don't understand how to read the data, how are you going to implement those interventions, which is what public health is all about. I also want to second the importance of writing skills and being comfortable articulating what you found in a way that is really understandable to the public and to whoever your audience is. I, for one, am just like, it's really important, you know, when you're writing a thesis, at least in my experience for undergrad, like, how am I using my words? What does this mean if I have some sort of design and study, but I say could versus may versus yes, definitely. There's all like different implications I'm learning through that process. And so I found leaning on my advisors is great. Also the Writing Center for any undergrad here, or I think grad to make use of that. I am an avid believer that the Writing Center is a wonderful place to grow and develop, and a great resource for Brown students.
I'll just add maybe sorry, Rachel, like a quick addition, this is not necessarily a specific skill, but I think something that the School of Public Health at Brown does really well is a lot of your courses, the assessments are project-based. So if you're in some type of, you know, biostats class, like the outputs you have from that are going to be, you know, take a data set and do XYZ with it. So, and then write a report about what you found. Those are really great. I mean, like I said, those are really great outputs to show to your job. So if you don't have a publication, if you don't have, you know, previous work experience, at least you have these products from classes that you can show to potential employers. So I would say, you know, just start thinking like really early about how you want to make use of those project assessments, and think about, you know, maybe there's a trend of, say, you know, like each of your projects are going to have to do with something related to HIV or food insecurity. Like, find your interest and kind of tailor those projects in class accordingly.
I think that's great. If you can build off of things you've already done and just how you're going to translate them across your actual position once you get the job. Coding was the first thing that came to my mind at the question. And I do think it's something that's kind of hard to teach yourself. I've now learned a few languages, and if you can get in a formal class, I think that you're going to, like, your rate of learning is going to be just a lot higher than whatever you can do on your own. The other thing I would say is just expressing your ability to figure things out, because more than anything across undergrad, master's, research in the real world, PhD, you need to just like be able to figure things out on your own. And from my experience, especially undergrads here, they're really excellent at that. And that's a really marketable skill, even if it's hard to put a label to. On top of which, just remembering that they're looking for somebody who's courteous and potentially like fostering a culture of diversity and inclusion and just like mutual respect. Those things go a really long way. There are lots of people who are smart in science, but they're not all like caring about kindness. So if you can show that, I think you will definitely stand out as an interviewee.
Okay, great, thank you. Our next question is, what were the top resources you used to search for opportunities?
So for me personally, Brown Connect has been absolutely huge, as well as if you're an undergrad at Brown has just so many programs like the UTRA or like summer research assistantships that it like within certain fields that can really help you like connect with a mentor who shares your interests. And a lot of these are tailored towards freshmen. So these have been the main ones. Also, a lot of other colleges kind of combine these huge lists of resources for specific programs related to a field like public health. And I know I've used, I think Dartmouth has a good one, and also Princeton. And I've definitely used those to find summer opportunities in the past.
Yeah, I would say I also, because I graduated in 2020, I also relied a lot on those job boards posted by, in my situation, the MPH programs at places like Emory, I think also GW perhaps, but a great development is that Brown now has, Brown School of Public Health has a similar job board that's updated. It seems very frequent. And in addition, I think that Sean Kelly also is sharing the opportunities on the School of Public Health's LinkedIn page. So it's a good thing to pay attention to.
Just to add to that, I think that LinkedIn overall is a really great resource. I'm not sure if you touched on that platform specifically, but as I learned even through Sean's work, not everyone is connected with Brown Connect as an alum, and they may not think to add that specific element to their, I don't know, like repertoire of things to reach people reach out to. So everyone kind of has LinkedIn, and I think what happens is when you put Brown University in your bio or something, maybe it gets curated in, so you have a lot more alumni to work with, and I've definitely utilized that tremendously.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question is, if you feel comfortable sharing, how many applications did you submit to ensure that you had enough options to choose from? And what was the range of your search? Is it only research or it only internships?
Okay, so I was laughing because I remember being in this process and being I don't know, it was a rude awakening because I was told by my career office at my School of Public Health at the time that you need to put out like 50 applications to get like a job. And you might want to put out more like 75 if you want to have like different options. And that felt like a really high number, but it was kind of accurate. And you also wanted to be tailoring your CV and your cover letter. A lot of places aren't doing cover letters anymore, so you want to like check into that. But tailoring it to kind of match their language. Some places are even screening via computer algorithms. So like it takes a while before it could get to a human. So if you never are matching your wording to theirs, it may not get in front of a human. It took me a few months, I think 3, before I took like my permanent job post-degree. So that can feel daunting, and also you need to be making money. So it's okay if you need to take something short-term. But if the audience is also just looking for, summer internships, I feel like that can be a much smaller pool of applicants.
Yeah, I think when I was looking for my first position as an undergrad, so some type of summer opportunity, I think I applied to maybe 12 or 15. And I initially was sort of, I guess, rejected or just didn't hear back from all of them. And then a little bit late in the game, you know, one of them kind of came back and was like, actually, we need someone here. So that was a little bit of luck. More recently, I think, you know, using my networking, so like having my professors that know me kind of advocate for the positions I'm applying to, that also goes a long way. So yeah, just, I don't know, you know, thinking early about those, about the connections you're making, so that you have people to kind of push your application to the top of the list.
Just to add on to that, I think it's also important to have the sense of patience and never not take advantage of a call or an opportunity. I've had, like, for instance, when I did the Department of Health COVID triage work, that was totally incidental. I had this full internship with consulting, and then it got cut short for 6 weeks. I was like, oh, I have 4 weeks, you know, to find something productive to do. I really wanted to do something practical public health. And then just randomly, I had literally emailed someone at the CDC, a Brown alum, in November when I was looking at initial stuff, ended up getting consulting. Okay. And then I received his email in April saying, hey, so sorry, I forgot to respond, would love to chat. And they ended up connecting me with someone at the Department of Health several months later and was able to do both the consulting and the COVID triage. I think that was just a really nice example that even if you don't get a response, you can, of course, you know, double email if you feel inclined, if it's necessary. But also, if they do respond late, I would never, you know, be upset or come up tainted, because you don't ever know where that connection can take you. And I'm very grateful that I responded and was willing to talk with them in April.
Thank you. Our next question is, what are some advice would you give for preparing for interviews?
I would say just to practice, write out a lot, like some of your experiences in very simple terms that you can you can speak to in the interview, and then just like kind of practice saying that. I know like this has helped me because like sometimes our research can be really in depth within a certain field, and you really want to be able to explain that in a very digestible way when you're talking to interviewers so that they're on the same page as you. Other than that, just the usual, be personable, smile. The person who's like interviewing you across from you probably just wants to know about your experience rather than grill you, because like the interview process usually comes after the first screen of your application, so it shouldn't be a huge source of stress.
I would say that, yeah, I agree with everything that you just said. And in addition to that, I think interviews are always going to be nerve-wracking. But for me, at least, the best practice for interviews and the best kind of, you know, trying to make me feel better about interviewing in the future has been actual interviews. So I think that kind of goes back to the last question of how many opportunities should you apply for at one time? And the answer is always, you know, more than you have at this point. And so if you're applying to a bunch of different places, yeah, you're not going to get interviews at all those places, but maybe you'll get a small handful, and then it's not going to feel like this one specific interview is a make or break moment. And then my other piece of advice would be definitely prepare a list of questions that you have for the organization itself, because that, more than anything, I think demonstrates your interest and commitment to the role potentially.
That's a great point. I was going to say, be sure, I mean, many of you will be applying for research jobs. Research the people who are going to be interviewing you and research the companies so that you can really talk confidently about what it is going in. Nothing is more off-putting than someone who comes in for a job interview and doesn't and says the wrong name of the hospital, or like hasn't really connected with what the mission of the organization is. The other thing is, I think Nidhi was like alluding to this, but do mock interviews. I don't know if that's something that Sean offers, but I know I did a bunch before I ever went into real interviews. And I would type out answers, and you can get online has them. There are a lot of resources for the types of questions employers usually will ask, so that you can have those kind of polished and prepared, and that can also ease your anxiety the day of. Definitely always look professional. I'm sure you all know this, but I feel like it does say a lot about how you present yourself. If you're someone who's taking notes and you put on a blazer or something, just like speaks to your level of preparation and how excited you are for the job. And then lastly, don't forget to send thank you notes. I really advocate for a nice, like personalized email, but in normal non-COVID times, I would also do a handwritten one if it was a job that I really wanted, because people remember that, they put it up on their bulletin board, and like, it just speaks out how much, and then like you start to develop a relationship, which is really one out of this.
And just to add on to everything that is said, and I definitely echo all the sentiment, I think it's important for you to come up with like behavioral questions, so to speak, and you kind of touched upon this, like obviously researching the hospital or the organization or the company or whatever it is, but also coming up with different prompts in your head. There's a sheet on Career Lab about behavioral questions, like what's the toughest time you had to work with a team and like how did you overcome it? Or like what is the greatest obstacle that you've had to face in an academic setting and what did you do to like alleviate the challenges? Or like how do you work well with people? Like they're just kind of classic questions. And I know I spent like hours one day coming up with answers to, I think there's like 50 questions. I mean, take it in stride. And then I always just looked at that an hour or so before the interview. My memories didn't really change. Like I could use the same examples. So that was nice, but I think it's important to come prepared and just to know they're going to ask you questions like that most likely.
I'd also maybe, I know we're trying to limit the number of people that respond to each question. I think that it's also going to be a little bit job dependent how you prepare. But I know that I'm currently searching for full-time research assistant positions for after graduation. And, you know, given my biostatistics degree, like I'm applying for a lot of kind of analyst positions and quantitative heavy positions. And ironically, I just had my first like technical interview a couple weeks ago that I didn't expect to be a technical interview. And they ask very specific questions like, what R packages have you worked with? And they ask you to describe in detail some, you know, projects that you've worked through and like how you've overcome kind of these analysis snafus or whatever. So just to say that I think being able to give really specific examples and maybe even reviewing like your proudest piece of work, just so that you have that in your mind and you aren't just kind of giving this vague, like rambling response. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all for sharing. Our next question is, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started the application process?
Tons of things. So I'm thinking about most recently my job search, my post-grad job search, but I think this is applicable to internships as well as research programs. I would say, especially in public health, don't worry if you don't hear back for a while, especially if you're applying to places like nonprofits or government organizations. I think that is pretty normal to have be a couple months or more from when you hear, from when you apply and when you hear back. So not worrying, but taking that time to keep applying to places. I think also tailoring your resume / CV is really important. It is easy to just, you know, with a CV especially, just put everything that you've ever done on it. But a lot of the time, a recruiter or whoever's looking at your application is only really going to read the first couple of pages. At least that's what I've been told. So yeah, just really putting, whether that's reorganizing sections, deleting specific jobs to make way for more jobs. I think that is super important and kind of underestimated the importance of what your resume actually looks like.
Really second the tailoring your resume, because I remember straight out of high school, I had like every single thing on my resume, and my first research mentor was actually kind enough to sit me down and say that, like, no, you don't need half the stuff I don't need to know what you did your freshman year of high school. Just keep it short, keep it relevant, and roughly order your resume in terms of like most relevant to least relevant, and always like keep it 1 to 2 pages at this stage. Other than that, just really like not being afraid to reach out to people, even if the connection like might be a little spurious at times, because I mean, we all, like, you go to Brown, it's a really great place, and a lot of people see the Brown degree and like value it a lot. So reaching out to people like in cold emailing has really helped me, and I think it's really helped a lot of people. So just not letting that initial email fear keep you from reaching out to someone who can potentially like offer you help or even a position.
And when people don't respond to you, nudge them, maybe 2 weeks later. You can kind of assess the timeline of when the nudge is appropriate, but like poke everyone that doesn't respond to you.
Great. So our next question is, what makes me a more competitive applicant? Research, internship, or both?
I mean, I feel like you shouldn't, I hate to frame it as like you have to do something in order to like become the most competitive. I think, as Nidhi said, we go to Brown and you want to find something you're passionate about. I think that quality over quantity completely. I have had the privilege of doing a lot of different internship experiences, and I think that has played a part into my build up, to get like a full-time position after my MPH and like things of that nature. I've also dabbled in research and done my thesis on it, but I don't put external or internal pressure on myself. I kind of just figure out what am I passionate about and how can I gain more experiences in the field, and whether that be only through internships or through research because you want to go into research further on in life, or maybe obviously if I'm not speaking for being pre-med at all, I'm not in that track. But I think that it's just important to really talk out your desires and figure out what you want through your time at Brown and post grad, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself. You have a lot of resources here. I think you want to tell a story. I think I always tell, like, I'm actually a college prep tutor, and I'd like to tell like the seniors I work with, like, try to tell a story with your resume and with your personal statement, because they're going to ask you, why did you do this? What was the value in it? And if you're just saying, oh, I did it because, I don't know, my friend did it and like I wanted to get into med school, and like I also thought the nonprofit was kind of cool, but like I wanted to fill my plate up, like they're going to sense that even if you don't directly say it. You just want to make sure you're true with what you say. And I know that sounds kind of silly, and maybe you're like, but I want to be the most competitive, and we all do, and you will, but through the integrity of what your work is and not quantity. That's kind of what I have to say about that.
I would say maybe, like touching on kind of the different sectors that you can work in, I would motivate the jumps less by, okay, of course, practically speaking, like you take what you can get, right? And it's really hard to find a job. It's really hard to find a job or a position today during COVID. So, like we're kind of talking idealistically here, but I would say if you have the option, motivate your switches from, say, research to internship, or, internship to nonprofit, or whatever we're talking about. Motivate them by like what you learned with your previous position. So I remember like working at a Department of Health, and I didn't really like that government position. I was kind of like, okay, maybe government isn't really for me. And so that's what motivated, my future switches, not necessarily trying to like touch them all unless you just really don't know where you want to end up. But I think like use your previous ones to guide what you next look for.
This is really wonderful advice. I wish I had been this mature when I was like finishing my master's or my undergrad. But I also want to add that the most competitive person doesn't always get the job. So I think another like really important piece for jobs, for programs, is about fit. So if you look like you align with their mission and what they're about, or you like have a click or a common like interest with someone at the company, I think that is sometimes what's most important. So be kind to yourself, know that you are awesome and they would be lucky to have you, but also spend some time thinking about what you want, because this is your life.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, what advice do you have on finding mentors and advisors?
Researchers at Brown has been very helpful to me in helping me search for people based on what research area they're interested in. Other than that, just being willing to meet over Zoom and COVID times, or even face-to-face and non-COVID times, has really helped me filter out the kind of lab culture I do want to work with and which I do not want to work with. I feel like the right mentor will will just kind of make you feel at ease, like with your level of experience in the field, and also give you room to grow. So just really be willing to like get to know the people in the lab that you're working with first before just committing to a project.
Yeah, I think that what has helped me a lot, I've heard in the past when this question has come up, and from my friends who are in the program, that taking classes with certain professors has kind of been that segue into either a mentorship or advisory role, or maybe speakers who are coming to guest lecture in your class. That's how some people have met people that they would get involved with in their labs, et cetera. I think in addition to that, so you're assigned some advisors, and even if that person doesn't become, your closest advisor or your closest mentor, just speaking to any faculty member, whether it's your professor or an assigned advisor, and kind of trying to discuss with them what your interests are and where you see yourself going. They know their colleagues, so they know maybe even research that hasn't yet been shared on researchers at Brown, or maybe there's a professor who isn't teaching faculty, but they are research faculty and they're doing a project that they could see that would be a good fit. Just kind of using that network, that's how I found my own mentor, and it turned out great.
Okay, great, thank you. Many of you did research assistantship or internship during the semester. And how did you balance schoolwork, research, and life? And how much time did you allocate to research projects or internship? And do you have any advice or tips on time management and maintaining a healthy balance of work and life?
My bosses have always said, for research, for RI positions I've had during school, they've always said class comes first. Maybe not everyone says that, and you might, get stuck with someone who's kind of butting heads with your academic expectations. But I think that's a good goal, to remember that classes should come first, especially probably as an undergrad or master's student. My feelings on that for a PhD is probably a little bit different, but so I guess what I would say is, if we're being specific, I think 10 to 20 hours a week for some type of part-time RA position is more than reasonable. I currently have 2 RA positions, and my opinion on that is, I love both of them, so it would be hard to drop one, but I would say that kind of saturating yourself in one position is better than doing a tiny bit in a bunch of different things, just because, with limited time for each one, it's hard to really grow into that position and to kind of spend the time to, write a paper or whatever you're doing. So I would just say kind of condensing the extracurriculars into maybe the ones that you really get the most out of.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think that communication is key. I'm currently not in a research position. I was working with Mary Flynn, but because of COVID, our cooking lessons couldn't really occur anymore. But I would still have open communication, oh, can I switch days of coming in because I have an exam in a few days? You as an undergrad, I've had the experience of, again, the guest student comes first, and right now I'm working virtually helping with the nonprofit Brown Health Institute. And so that's been a great experience. But yeah, I'll say, oh, I have class tonight. I actually can't finish my edits for this articles I need, whatever, by tonight. Can I give it to you by tomorrow at 10 a.m.? So just, again, being forefront about what I have to do. And if it's logistics don't work out, they're going to be understanding because you are a student.
Great. Our next question is about doing research. It's regarding research. How did you narrow down your research topic and develop your research questions?
I feel a lot of it at the student level, for me and a lot of my classmates that have talked to you about this, is just identifying a broad area and then jumping on a project that seems interesting. And obviously there's room to switch and kind of test out a bunch while you're still a student, but I think a lot of it is guided by the projects that you find interesting or what you choose to work on, combined with your own academic experience.
Yeah, I would also second So when I'm thinking about the question that you posed about developing your research question, that reminds me of my thesis, I guess, specifically, because in my research jobs during my MPH and during college, they were more, research assistantships that were kind of, dictated by other people what the protocols were. But as far as my thesis went, I think, yeah, I agree that kind of basing your own research and having it kind of as a stem from a professor, your mentor, your advisor's research, that while it is maybe a little bit more prescribed as far as which direction you can go in, because you're relating it back to what that professor's research topic is. From what I've heard, starting from scratch and kind of building your own project, go through the IRB and all of like the data collection, that can be really, really time consuming. And if you have limited time, especially if you're in a master's program or even as an undergrad, an upperclassman undergrad, you are going to have way more time to do data analysis, write up all your results if you kind of are jumping in when stuff is already underway. So that's what I would recommend.
Great, thank you. Since we're almost out of time, like in 5 minutes, what is the main message that you'd like the audience to take away?
Yeah, sure, I'll go. Play to your strengths and experiences, and don't make this like a brute force thing. It should be, it's more strategic, and you have to know like where to put your effort as far as finding good mentors, finding good recommenders, and using your past experiences to speak to potential future ones.
I think my research would probably be, my advice would be different depending on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to a freshman or sophomore undergrad, my realistic or practical advice is kind of take what you can get and diversify your search so that you're really capturing like what we talked about earlier, kind of volunteer experiences or just things that don't fit the classic mold. But then if you're, like more advanced in your studies, I think thinking about fit, like Rachel was talking about earlier, is really important, and thinking about sort of the reciprocal nature of like what you're going to give to that position and what you'll get out, and thinking about, like those kind of dynamics.
Yeah, I definitely. Oh, go ahead, Ellie.
Okay, just quickly, I think adding on to the playing to your strengths is definitely an important skill to have, and also don't be afraid to take the classes you need to make yourself well-rounded, especially while you have the resources at Brown. Like I'm not a quantitative person, but I was able to, do the math I needed to get the consulting job through practice, and also just understand like now I'm in data stats, and do I love it? Probably not, but I think it is useful and helpful, and I'm glad that I'm pursuing my MPH where I can practice those skills, and just being open about that and conversing with the employers or whoever it is that, you may not be more of this person, but I am willing to put in the work to get where I need to be to like have the end goal what you actually want. So yeah, does that make sense?
I second that. I was just going to close by saying be kind to yourself throughout the process, because it can be discouraging or stressful, and everything is a little extra stressful right now. So keep that in mind, and lean on your mentors, because I feel like figuring out what you want to do in research takes a lot of time, and being really intentional and active about figuring out what you don't want to do and what you do want to do before you get there. So give that to yourself, because you want to ultimately have a career that you are happy with.
Yeah, the last thing I would add, and this kind of goes with being kind to yourself. This is advice that I think is often given to job seekers, but it's also true for, I would say, definitely internships and even research, is that, the first opportunity that you get and that you choose, that's not the rest of your life. Everybody's careers, whether that's, while you're at Brown, and even after Brown, it's a series of steps. So even if it feels like once you start working on a research project or you're in an internship and you're saying, this is not for me, like Anna Lucia said, working in government, like that's okay. Yeah, it's about finding out what you don't like. It might feel like, oh gosh, I wish I didn't waste my time on this opportunity that I kind of regret applying for. But everything that you learn, good and bad, is going to help you, not just in deciding what you want to do, but also, you know, if you ever need a skill that you didn't do anything else, but you're working on this internship and, you know, who knew that I was going to need to learn these acronyms or something, and you're going to get something out of it. So yeah, and not being too hard on yourself throughout that process. You're not making a mistake. It's just a progression across time.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing today. And thank you for our audience too, tuning in and joining our webinar today. We hope you found these tips helpful, and good luck with your research or internship applications. We hope to see you soon again in our events. Thank you, everyone, and have a good weekend. Take care. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.